Hello, everyone, students, parents, teachers, librarians. I am Chris Evans, and I'm a teacher at Orange Coast College, and I am thrilled to invite everyone to join the second annual STEAM Race to Space Reading Challenge, and it begins today. In conjunction with the Orange County Department of Education, the For Space Company, and the Orange County Children's Book Festival, the race begins now. Just for reading some amazing books, you can win cool prizes: tickets to the Aquarium of the Pacific, or an NBA game, art lessons with a Disney animator, Amazon gift cards, a conversation with a real live NASA astronaut. Amazing prizes. Most importantly, you'll learn how science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics can lead to a rewarding career and help us figure out how to solve all of the problems that we face in this world. So join us in this race to space. After today's event, your teacher is going to show you how to visit the website and register. Everyone needs to go to readsteam.org to start today. So let's blast off by talking to some inspiring writers and scientists. Can we bring everyone in today? Excellent. Abigail, Karen, Salim, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Great to be here.
Glad to be here.
I loved your books, and I just can't wait to talk to you about them.
We're excited to talk too.
Thank you. Karen, Salim, let's start with you first. Okay. Let me introduce you first. Karen was a software engineer, a computer science teacher, a board member of the Computer Science Teachers Association, an education manager for the MIT App Inventor. And Salim was a longtime mathematics teacher, a curriculum designer, an app inventor. They both currently work for the MIT App Inventor, which boasts over, is this right, 1 million users a month? Welcome.
That's right. Yep.
Pleasure to be here.
That is incredible. That is incredible. Well, first, this is such a cool book. I loved it. My son, who's 17, has already said, hey, Dad, I want that book when you're done. So he's already claimed it to let you know it is out of my possession after we're done today. Can you first tell us a little bit about the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory and the MIT App Inventor?
Sure, I can start. So this CSAIL, as it's more affectionately known, is just the Artificial Intelligence Laboratory at MIT. It's a very large group with many smaller groups within it. And both Salim and I work for the App Inventor group, which is led by Hal Abelson, a professor at MIT. And we worked with developers who work on the platform, develop the software that allows kids to learn how to code very easily. Both Salim and I worked on the education part of things, so doing things like writing books and writing curriculum and tutorials to help kids learn how to code with App Inventor.
If I could just add to that, so even though our project is relatively new, maybe a little bit older than a decade, the tradition in MIT goes way back to Seymour Papert, who was sort of the father of constructionism, sort of creating things, doing things, and learning that way. And they were also the first ones to introduce Logo. And you might also know that Scratch is another product of the MIT Media Lab. So we are delighted to be here with you.
How did you two get started coding? Was this something that started at MIT, or did it start well before that?
You want to?
Well, I'll start. Yeah. So I actually started a long time ago, back when there were even punch cards. So you had to type your code in, you'd have punch cards. So yeah, I came out of college. I was actually an art major, and I couldn't really get a job in art, and lucked into a job. And I didn't know anything about coding at that point, and learned how to code. And then very soon after that, I decided, you know what, I think I'd rather be a teacher. So I just continued. And as you go through, you know, once you're a programmer, you'll know that you have to know a lot of different languages. So once you know the basics, you can learn and pick up most any language.
My background, growing up in Istanbul, Turkey, is mathematics. And when I was growing up, it was almost scorned upon, to have folks doing computers. I mean, we were so proud to be able to do a lot of things mentally. I went through an entire college period like that. And I became a teacher of mathematics. And then when I was about 32, I was fascinated by a mathematical problem called the 8 queens puzzle. You might have heard about that. It's about basically putting 8 queens on a board, on a chessboard, so that none of them can kill each other. So I worked for that, a very hard problem to solve. And then to be able to solve that, I learned programming. And what happened is my favorite mathematician, Carl Gauss, could only do so many of them, maybe 80 of them. So when I learned how to do the programming for that, I was able to get 92 of them, all of them. And I remember the moment I was able to get something even Gauss didn't get. And it just totally opened my mind. Like, wow, this is something that I really should look into. And I went to study at the master's level. So that's how I got hooked on, and MIT came much later.
Wow. Wow. Well, I will say this, your book, even for less tech savvy people like me, it's really awesome. It is so well written. It's so clear. Like I started doing it last night. Like I can do this myself. How did you guys get the idea for the book and like the format and the tone and the structure? How you put this together?
So the book itself is based upon a curriculum we wrote a few years back. We worked with a group in Hong Kong, bringing coding to 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. So it's a 3-year curriculum, and we developed several apps along with worksheets to help students learn how to make these apps. And then we decided, let's take some of these apps that are that we think are interesting for young people and turn it into book form so that we can reach more people than just the kids in Hong Kong. So we picked out some of the kind of more we think fun apps to make, and then we also included a few apps from our youth radio project, which works with youth radio out of Oakland, California, and picked out a few of theirs as well that we think would be interesting for young people to make. The format, I think we have to attribute that to the illustrators from Candlewick. They did an amazing job. We gave them kind of our screenshots of what the code will look like, but they did the magic of making it really, I think, shine and make it easy for kids to pick up and learn how to make an app.
If I could just add something. So we had this very constructionist book, you could basically build things, exciting things, but we also wanted to, and it sort of started like one day I almost had like a daydream. I imagined the finished book and somebody was reading it and they were really fascinated. So when I look what they're reading, I actually saw stories in there. I saw stories that from all over the world, young inventors, and how they got hooked on coding and how they were able to create something that ultimately became useful to their communities. So that thought said, let's pull these folks that we already know from all over the world, and we came up with 6 stories at the end of every chapter. So together, I feel they create a very nice organic. You build a little bit, you read a little bit, build a little bit more, and then sort of open-ended. You could create your own apps.
Well, Salim, that leads to my next question, which is this. I love the storytelling aspect of this. You guys really presented how some young people created some amazing apps, and you tell their story. Of the ones that you presented, like, what are some of your favorites that when those young people gave you these apps and show you this, you were amazed by them? What were your favorites?
I'll tell quickly. My favorite is called Hello Navi, where a bunch of girls, I believe in Texas, if I'm not mistaken, they had a blind classmate, and he was having a very difficult time navigating the buildings. And they figured out how to create an app that will take the student and allow the student to go through these hallways and find classes. So that's the one that has a really special place in my heart. And then they eventually met Obama. That also is a fascinating story. What's your favorite, Karen?
Well, I want to say like these 6 are our favorites that we decided to put into the book because there's so many stories of young people and the great stuff they're making. Probably mine would be Chinmay, who's from India, and she made an app to help flood victims after people in her area, Chennai, were affected by that. So she went and did that, and then I actually got to meet her because she came to each year. App Inventor has a summit at MIT, and she was 11 years old at the time, and she came and she just wowed everyone. At that point, she made a whole app that measured how much water you were using, and if you had a leaky faucet or something, how much water was being wasted. So she blew away the whole crowd at 10 or 11 years old, what she was able to do with App Inventor.
That's what I loved about your book, because I think it's so easy for us as adults to, wave the phone around and say, oh, well, they're wasting all their time. And what you clearly showed is these young people are brilliant. They're problem solvers. They are trying to change the world in ways that really needs to be addressed. And I'm curious, Karen, you mentioned there were lots of stories that maybe didn't make the book. Are we thinking about a sequel? Are we going to extend this further? Are there more stories that need to be told? Do I need to go to the, to buy another book quickly?
We don't have any immediate plans, but certainly I know the App Inventor team is working currently to really highlight some people. I just was watching some videos yesterday of recent winners of an appathon that App Inventor holds every year. So we continue to be inspired by these young people. It is amazing. If you give them the tools to be creative, they can really go to town.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that so many in our audience want to know how they can get a career in STEM, how they can become scientists and inventors and do exactly what you're saying, Karen, which is, change the world. I'm sure they have to look at this and say, something's got to be done about these issues. What advice do you guys have for, young minds who want to be scientists and inventors and, just change the world?
You want me to start, Salim?
Yeah, Karen, go ahead.
Okay, so my advice is to get involved in different programs. So I'm actually right now developing curriculum for Technovation, which is a program for girls, and they make mobile apps to solve a problem in their community. As well, App Inventor has monthly challenges. They have appathons every year. So I would say for young people that are interested, get involved in some of these programs and you'll learn how to code. Everywhere on the internet you can look. There's all sorts of ways to learn how to code and to teach yourself. But I think getting involved in programs where you're working with other young people, you can work in teams, and you can see what they're doing and learn from each other. That's the way to go. But definitely don't be afraid to try things, and just say, oh, I don't know how to code. I'm too young to code. Anyone can code, and especially with a tool like App Inventor, which is so easy to pick up, then you can just see what amazing things young people can do.
My thought here is sort of inviting people to fall in love with difficult problems. Like everything I've done in life, I never said, oh, let me study computer science. It was always like, even in that example I gave, there was some problem that fascinated me, and somehow I felt that it could be solved. I just don't know how. And as you start, continuing exploring, all these things come to you. If you need to learn a computer language, you will. If you need to learn a little bit history about this, the process, you will. If you need to meet other departments, other people, you will. So my advice would be sort of like, look at the bigger picture and see what fascinates you, and have faith that they may look insurmountable, but they are actually, eventually we're going to figure things out. And all of the rest will come to you, I think, easily and naturally.
I think that's beautifully stated. Karen, Salim, thank you so very, very much. That was wonderful. Everyone needs to pick up this book and start coding now. I can't wait to see how they change the world. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
So next up, we have Abigail Hing Wen. She is the author of the New York Times best-selling Love Boat Taipei and the newly released sequel Love Boat Reunion. Is that right? There it is. Okay. She has earned a degree in international business from Harvard, a law degree from Columbia, an MFA in creative writing. She's worked in Silicon Valley on artificial intelligence. She has an artificial intelligence podcast. You've been on Entertainment Weekly, Cosmo, Forbes, Hollywood. My goodness, Abigail, how do you have the energy? Where do you find the time?
I just do what I love. I have a blast, and I'm so happy to be here to meet with all of you. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for being here. You were interested and very skilled in so many areas: law, literature, politics, the tech industry. How did you start this love of this multifaceted, view of the world, of how you wanted to experience everything?
I didn't realize this was the case until I became a writer, but writers are interested in everything. They have, I think I've always just been really curious about the world. I grew up in Solon, Ohio, which had a very strong STEM program. And I actually was very, very heavily involved in math and science as a child. All through high school, I was on the Science Olympiad Club. I actually was the president my senior year. And I believe we were the first team that went on to nationals. But even in Science Olympiad, I was also doing things like this program called Write It, Do It, which you would actually write about the things that you saw and try to communicate, because science communication is also really important. And when I went to Harvard, I studied chemistry, but realized that I actually was more interested in like international relations. And so I find like as I've just begun my writing process, all these different aspects of who I was have come to bear and now are incorporated in my various stories.
Abigail, I find as a college teacher, so many of my students have been forced into one thing. Like, what is your major? What is the one thing you do? And what I love how you describe that, which is we should be well versed in everything and curious about everything. How did you become a writer and reader too? Like, were you always a reader from an early age?
I always was. And some of my favorite books were like the Chronicles of Narnia and Laura Ingalls. So they weren't necessarily STEM books, but I did love high fantasy books as well. Sci-fi, I read some, it wasn't really so much my cup of tea. And I have actually been writing my whole life. I don't really see them as mutually exclusive. And I think when I wrote the Love Boat books, I wrote a book with 30 different Asian American characters, and I wanted to showcase that diversity within the community. So some of them are STEM majors and some of them are art majors, and some of them don't know what they're going to do with their lives, and that's fine. And what I found over time is that my girly girl, who is kind of boy crazy, she goes on this, for those who don't know about the Love Boat program, it's an actual program in Taiwan where parents would send their kids to learn Chinese language and culture and also to find a spouse. And this was actually a real thing. And that's how it got its nickname Love Boat. But it ends up really being a summer free-for-all where the kids kind of just go crazy, sneaking out clubbing, dancing, but they're really high-performing kids. And so in some ways, it's kind of a way to blow off steam. And as I was writing the book, I realized, my really girly girl character who she's there to find a husband. She's totally boy crazy. She's a cheerleader. But she's actually a girl in STEM. And she's not what you think of when you think of STEM. And that was actually something that really struck me. I'm like, this is a story really worth following and seeing what is she going to do with this juxtaposition of her two selves.
Well, Love Boat Taipei was a huge New York Times bestseller, explosion. I think movie rights, right? It did so well. But you've decided you've got a sequel out there now. You brought back a few of the main characters, right? Sophie and Xavier, right? Why did you decide to focus on them for the sequel?
Well, when I wrote the first book, I actually wrote it originally from 4 points of view. So Ever, who's my main character of book one, Rick, who is one of the love interests, Xavier, and Sophie. And Xavier is like from a wealthy Taiwanese family. I actually wrote 120,000 words, 4 points of view, and I realized I had just way too much story for one book. So I had to scrap that whole thing, rewrote the whole thing from scratch. But I had all this leftover story after this, and I realized Xavier's story especially wasn't told. He actually has learning differences. He's got dyslexia that was undiagnosed for many years. But I also wanted, and Sophie is romantically interested in him in book one, and so I kind of felt like the two of them would team up to do something together. And so book two begins with Sophie going to Dartmouth recognizing that her summer of trying to find the right guy was a complete disaster. So she's sworn off boys, and now she's going to double down and be the best artificial intelligence major that Dartmouth has ever seen. But she is still herself. Like, she still loves fashion and clothing. And so what she tries to do is bring together her fashion interests with a project in her artificial intelligence class. And she's actually trying to get in off the wait list. So she really, the stakes are high. She needs to impress the professor. So he'll let her in. But he's just not that interested in her project. He's like, he has all these questions like about why this fashion app that she's trying to build is not going to work. And I found, working in Silicon Valley with a lot of startup companies, that was true for a lot of girls, a lot of female-led startups. It was hard for them to get funding. It was hard for them to kind of bring their ideas forward. They just were met with this wall of skepticism, and nobody realized it was actually implicit bias. Nobody would have said like, oh, it's because she's a girl, but that's what was happening. And so I think with Sophie, I was trying to really kind of show like, hey, you can be all these things. You can be fashion obsessed and a cheerleader, and you can also be in STEM.
Well, I thought she's a really wonderfully written character. I enjoyed seeing it through her perspective, and I'm rooting for her the entire time in the novel, I must admit. You answered my next question, which was like how you integrated artificial intelligence and all that you've been working with. I'm curious, do you mind, you have a passage from the book you could share with us today?
I'd love to, yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned, she doubles down at Dartmouth. So this is actually a passage from her first day of the class. It's jam-packed with all these people talking about things that she's never heard of. And her professor is very intimidating. He's up on the board. And so here's kind of when class kicks off. A video of Harrison Ford plays on the screen. Han Solo. His gray hair hangs neatly over his lined face. He raises a blue Yeti mug at us. Welcome to Introduction to Artificial Intelligence, he says. You're in for the ride of a lifetime with my good friend, Professor Horvath. I want to personally wish you well as you start the year. Also, I'm not actually Harrison Ford. I'm a deep fake, but I wish you well nonetheless. I laugh with the class as Professor Horvath takes center stage, hooking a thumb in his pants pocket. Well, as my good friend Harrison Ford said, first, a word to those, welcome, as my good friend Harrison Ford said. Now, first, a word to those on the wait list, as I know we have several hundred waiting anxiously. I'm sorry to say we are simply limited by auditorium capacity. I encourage you to find alternative classes, but if you're still hoping for the Horvath touch, please audit the class for now and submit your project proposals for the first assignment, which I will tell you about shortly. If spots open up in the next 2 weeks, I will admit waitlisted students based on the quality of your proposals. A few groans go up. A guy in the seat in front of me heads for the doors. The guy behind me motions to the empty seat. I almost refuse on principle, but I focus better when I can take notes, so I drop into it. This arrangement is actually good for me. If I can jump the wait list with a kick-ass proposal, then I actually have a real shot at getting in. Now onward, says Professor Horvath. AI is revolutionizing everything from robotics to energy to healthcare and everything in between. You will learn the fundamentals of artificial intelligence and how to build algorithms that are changing our world. Chatbots that talk to people, tools to help doctors. He launches into a world I've only ever associated with gamers. I type furiously, taking notes like I never have. I Google every other word he says and scan Wikipedia for context, deep learning, deep fakes, chatbots. I'm going to learn the secrets to unlocking the universe. I'm going to learn magic.
I was hoping you would choose that passage too. That was my favorite. So let me build off of that, because I love the way you describe that. How is science like magic?
There's so many things that we don't understand still about the universe. Like, the universe is just incredibly large. We haven't even penetrated our own galaxy. And I think there's like an incredible magic in that. Like, there's magic is like things, like things happen, like people levitate, or, a wand moves and something happens at the side of the room. And I think sometimes we see that with science too. There's, and then when you dig down into the fundamentals of why it does work, we often find that there's just incredible, beautiful design at the core of things. And that to me is magical.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about how, I know the statistics for college, that college now has many more young women than young men enrolled. But how do we get more young women? How do we get more representation in the STEM areas, in the STEM fields?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. When I went to law school, my class was actually slightly more women, but as I rose through the ranks and moved into leadership, the women all started to drop out. And I think there's a lot of factors at play. As I mentioned, I was actually chemistry at Harvard my first year, and then I ended up dropping out too. And I look back on that. That was the right choice for me. But I wondered if I would have stayed if there had been other women like me in the class, and there just weren't. And so I didn't have friends in my class. I didn't have a community. Like if I went to class and afterwards we all went out for lunch, or went to see the movies together, and that maybe that community would have helped tie me there longer. So I think that's part of it, is just building community where girls feel welcomed. They feel like, this is where I belong and I can do this. There's a lot of talk now, like this is what a scientist looks like, and they have like many diverse faces, and I love that movement. And then I think it's like kind of what I was, addressing in the book, like there's many ways of being a scientist, and there is so much that we haven't explored. So one example, in artificial intelligence, a couple of years ago, there was this artificial intelligence human resources app that did not correlate women with leadership roles. And this is actually deeply embedded in the historical data. Like women just historically were not getting leadership roles, and therefore their resumes, even if you stripped out their names and their gender, like their resumes still may have reflected some, feminine past, like maybe ballet or instead of football. And I think it takes a woman being at the table to even notice that this is happening. And it, just in the same way, it takes that diverse person at the table to notice, hey, this AI facial recognition is not working on my darker skin. And so like, I think empowering younger women to realize like they have a special and unique voice to bring to a field that traditionally has not had their voices there.
We need to change that table. You're exactly right. Abigail, back to your book. This is the sequel. Are we going to see another adventure? Is there something else that you're working on?
I wish I could share more. I will be able to share more soon. I actually do have multiple STEM books that are coming. They're forthcoming, that draw more on the world of artificial intelligence, of technology. I have a short story that is out in the world called The Idiom Algorithm. And it's about a kid in Silicon Valley whose girlfriend gets kidnapped, and he builds an algorithm to find her using idioms. So that, again, that's another tie-in between like the language and the sciences. But yeah, I have many more projects that are kind of just coming out of my time in Silicon Valley.
I can't wait to see those projects and read that story too. Where can I find that? So
that is actually in an anthology with Macmillan that came out in January called Serendipity. So this is actually the funny thing about my books. They are romantic comedies. And so people don't actually think, oh, STEM or girls in STEM. And same with like my short story. It's in an anthology of rom-com, YA rom-com stories. But that's partly, I think what I'm doing is like, as girls are reading these romantic comedies, they also find like, hey, and I can also be a girl in STEM and love romantic comedies.
I found when I was researching your book, when you go to the chat rooms that discuss your book, you have changed so many lives. Everyone says exactly what you're saying there. Like, I expected to read it for this reason, but instead, this is what I found. And it was universal throughout them how many people you've inspired, not only to read a great book, but to truly get involved in these things that are not, encouraged perhaps by parents or others. And I love that. And again, such an inspiration. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm happy to hear that.
And off the record, you can tell me what's coming next, because I'm so curious. Now I'm hooked. Thank you.
I will say the film is coming. Yeah, the film, we wrapped filming. It's all announced. We have Ashley Lau starring as Ever Wong, Ross Butler starring as Rick, and a number of other folks. So I'm so thrilled with the film and excited to share it with the world.
When can we expect that?
So no date's been announced yet, but what has been announced is the casting. We filmed, and Lionsgate is on board as our global distributor. And Ashley actually was recently cast in The Hunger Games, which is super exciting.
I cannot wait. Thank you, Abigail. I would like to bring everyone back, if I could. There's Karen, there's Salim, and I also would like to welcome Pat Burns. She is the co-founder and director of the Orange County Children's Book Festival. So, Pat, welcome to the group.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the amazing authors we had today. Enjoyed getting to know you and researching your books and your stories and working with your publishers and your representatives, and how passionate they were about your work too. So it's our honor to introduce them to the students throughout Orange County. And to that, I want to say to the students, let's have fun reading challenge, right? I think I could rename it. Let's have fun reading challenge. Yeah, but we're going to explore the STEM books and STEAM books that are going to open your mind and your vision about a future that can be so successful and flourish in ways you never imagined. So it's not just about the very cool prizes, and they are very wow. It's also about the prize you're going to get up here in your brain and in your soul to make things and do things differently. So I just want to say again, so happy you're all here and glad we could do this STEM time together. And Chris, I'd love for you to send it and see if these authors have anything they'd like to close with.
Guys, anything else? I'm inspired, and I want to figure out that queen problem too. I'm going to go try to set that up on my chessboard today. And I know you are much smarter than I am. I will not come close, but I'm going to try. So, guys, I'll let you close.
I'll start. I'll just. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I can just reiterate what Pat said. Reading books just opens up your world. I mean, I as a kid, I just loved reading. I continue to love reading, and it just so I encourage everyone to read as much as you can through this reading challenge.
I just want to compliment this event, and Chris, you in particular. You really open up the guests that you have. You have done your research, you have read the books, and you really know the human psychology. I really enjoyed from the morning till now. I've been watching them, and I'm very grateful to be part of this.
Yeah, and I'll say the same. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Salim and Karen. It was wonderful to be part of the panel, and to everyone who stopped by. Do what you love, find ways to bring it all together.
That's the perfect conclusion. I want everyone to go to the readsteam.org, join the reading challenge, win some great prizes, and read some amazing books and change the world. Thank you so very, very much.